Oh, there we go.
There we go. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Adventures in Truth podcast. I'm here with my good friend, Dr. Jeffrey Smith. Hi, Jeff.
Hey, Jim, how are you?
I'm well, thanks. How are you?
Never better.
Good to hear. Okay. Do we need to pause on that? I'd love to hear more.
Well, yes, let's do.
Okay.
And I would love to challenge everybody to begin to at least think it, that if you truly are living in the now, in this moment, wherever you are, you have never been better than right now. And it makes people do exactly what Jim did, because we did not rehearse this. And everybody I say that to goes, what? And we don't know what to do with it. But it does help one be mindful of, I am only in this minute, and what happened behind me and what's yet to happen in front of me isn't my reality. Only this is my reality. So
Yeah.
I'm going to just keep saying, I have never been better.
Well, you know what's interesting about I think the thing that takes people off guard is what happens in your field, what happens in your energy when you say it. Everything lights up. Everything goes bam. And you're like, wow, okay. So that's pretty awesome. I mean, and that it creates that kind of a response in your energy is even more awesome. And it's something you can see and you can feel. So it's like, how could you not do that? You know, because as soon as you give your energy to that, your vibration goes up. That's that whole energy up, energy down thing. That's cool.
Right. Well, could we agree that perhaps any other answer would be a distortion of truth, which is what our podcast is about? That you would be making a comparison to either something that has already happened or something that has not yet happened with regard to where we are right now. And if, because easily somebody could say, well, if I've never been better, then this is as good as I've ever felt. But normally we would be comparing that to my highest memory of however I have felt, or the fear of how I may feel in the future. So, how much are we actually living in the moment? And we've had other podcasts in the past where I think we've arrived at the idea that not very often, and not very many of us are really here right now. So we appreciate our dear listeners who are tuning in and who want to swim upstream a little bit, or change strokes, or swim a different way, and try some of these fun things out to have a different experience. Change your frequency.
Absolutely. Great tool. And again, observing what took place in your energy around that, which was completely obvious, is the impact it creates. It definitely shifts your field. It definitely shifts your state in that moment.
I used to say, because I've been at this a while, and I've got 8 to 10 people I see each day on any given day. And I used to say, when people would ask how I'm doing, and not everybody does, so maybe that would be an exaggeration to say I've done it 8 to 10 times a day, but let's say 5 times a day. I used to say, when people would say, how are you, Dr. Smith? Or how are you, Jeff? I would say perfect. And their experience of that would be, I'm bodaciously exaggerating and claiming to be the expression of perfection, which, I mean, if you go there, I kind of am saying that. But what I really was saying is, I believe the only thing that can be happening right now is what's happening right now. And that is my definition of perfection, based on a design that I believe has been inspired, or an intelligent design, or just love, or whatever is happening right now has been allowed, has been created, has been ordained, has been something. You can pick any of those, go anywhere you want with it. But people had a hard time grasping that what we're experiencing right now is perfect. So when I would say I am perfect, most people interpreted that as me bragging, as though I am perfect. I'm saying I am perfect. Which isn't really what I was trying to say. It's like just living in this moment and embracing your life as it is happening right now is an expression of perfection, as opposed to ideal. Most people want to live the expression of what they believe is idyllic, as opposed to what they're experiencing, which would get them out of this life lesson that we're in, which would get them out of this struggle or challenge, which is the real reason why we're here, is to learn all this stuff. And it's obviously proven that because there are all these challenges that exist, this is the way that the human experience does learn, is through a challenging expression that we call life. Anyway, I rambled on enough about that. So I'm experimenting now with the...
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Experimenting now with
I was just saying, I'm experimenting with changing my response from perfect to never better.
It led me to want to have you do both of them so that we can experience the difference in the vibration, because even as you're talking about it, there's so much, and I think you illuminated it well. There's so much baggage on the word perfect or perfection. And I was even running it through my head. I couldn't find a way to say that didn't sound like an egomaniac,
Right.
I mean, and regardless of intention, no matter how you try to soften the word, it doesn't go the same place that the other does. So I was hoping that we could just do a little thing here so that whoever's watching or listening can see the difference, because you're offering a really awesome tool, and it'd be great to be able to say, oh, now I get what the difference is, why word choice is so important, why being clear about what I'm expressing with my energy is so important, because it really has an impact. So we'll do round one. You can pick whichever one you want in whichever order you want. I'll just ask you how you're doing it. You can say, okay. So here we go with our little experiment. Hi, Jeff. How are you?
Perfect.
Great.
How are you, Jim?
Great. I am well, thank you. Okay, that was the first one. So now we're going to round two.
All right.
Good afternoon, Jeff. How are you today?
Never better.
Good to hear.
How are you, Jim?
I am well and couldn't be better, actually. End of round two. So I'll tell you what happened on my end.
Okay.
On my end, I didn't have a response for the first one. There was not an automatic want to engage. There was, oh.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Like there was like nothing to say to that. And the second one for me as the receiver was engagement. Was, that's cool, because where your energy goes, you go, oh, I want to go there. That's cool. The other one didn't. It went. So I'm curious if you noticed a difference in your expression of it.
I did, and it was more than subtle, less than profound, but more than subtle. The first one just felt like I'm throwing a word out there, and it was more intellectual.
Yeah.
It was more cognitive. The second experience, I actually felt myself just subtly cock my head to the side a little bit, and I engaged the camera and just went with the never better. Like, I'm happy to share with you, I've never been better than I am right now. Yeah. So yeah, it did feel different.
Yeah, there's a vulnerability that's different. Where perfect doesn't seem to have a vulnerability, which isn't that interesting, because the idea of perfection is not about being vulnerable in our culture. That's not, perfection is put together, is done. So anyway, there you go. Our little experiment for the beginning of the show. It's perfect. And it actually lays the groundwork. Go ahead. What?
I was just going to say that this whole thing has been completely organic, wasn't rehearsed, and Jim and I had no idea that this part was going to happen.
No, we usually don't. But it was interesting. What we did know was, well, when we came together was in talking about our topic of the day. This lays a good foundation for where we're about to go. Because where we're about to go is kind of on the leading edge, kind of out there a bit. I'm still kind of struggling with where I'm at in it. So Jeff encouraged that we just kind of go there with it and see what happens, because
I specifically said, Jim, why aren't we recording this?
yes, you did, like 3 times, I think. And finally I caved in and said, because I don't feel comfortable. And then you said,
yeah. And what I love so much about you, Jim, is your willingness to do what you do, which is be transparent and authentic. And I know it would have been maybe a little bit more comfortable to do a draft version of this, but my experience in what we're doing, and if we're going to call this an adventure,
exactly,
the adventure happens as we're adventuring, not after we've already blazed the trail and gone back and walked it the second
and
time.
written the script. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, so here we go. So I saw a movie this past week, that is called Beyond Neverland, which I'm sure many listeners by now will have heard of in some fashion or form. It is causing crazy ripples in the world because of the nature of the movie. If you're not familiar with it, it's a documentary that's on HBO. It's 2 of a number of boys who are now men, the story of their relationship with Michael Jackson. And it's a very, very intimate, very long. The movie is actually in 2 sections of 2 hours each. And then there's another additional interview special that Oprah does with the actors and or not the actors, I mean, they are the actors, but they're actually the people who lived through it, and the director. And so the thing that I found so profound about this movie really has not much to do with Michael Jackson, in the sense that the movie doesn't go after him. It doesn't paint him in some way, this big ogre evil thing. It's just the story originally from the kid's perspective of the relationship that they had with him. And the relationships are well documented. The amount of footage that this documentary has of Michael Jackson and Michael Jackson with each of these kids, and interacting with the kids and engaging with the kids and other kids who were not a part of this documentary, who were not willing to step up and talk about their experience. So here's what happened for me. He created an environment of tremendous amounts of love. He was apparently a very lonely person. And he discovered 2 of these kids were from Australia. And they were discovered via talent contest. One kid, 7 years old, this was when Michael Jackson was at the height of his explosive, crazy success. That he dressed up like him and learned the dances and was able to do the dances. And then that got to Michael. And then, and when you're hearing it initially, you're thinking, how cool is this? This kid goes into this contest, and somebody in Michael's arena sees it because of how big Michael is in the world. And he reaches out to these people and starts to engage this family and this kid in this relationship that evolves over a few years. But all you see in the guys telling the story is the crazy amount of love that they had for this man who loved them like they've never been loved before, like in their own experience. I mean, I was tripping out because the one guy, I couldn't get past the fact that every time he would share something, he was living it while he was sharing it. And so his eyes would just glow, and he would have this look on his face of remembering some very passionately wonderful periods of his life. And then the words, and then I blew him, and then we had sex. And it didn't change for them. It changed for us, if that makes any sense. So it was really confounding, and still is kind of confounding to me, because he being Michael, according to the way this documentary is structured, he never harmed these kids. He never did anything to them other than love them like crazy. I mean, and I don't just mean using them for sex. He spent a lot of time building the relationship with the kid, with the parents, with the families, um, engaging them, and I mean, yeah, he paid for a lot of stuff and got involved in a lot of things. He would go to their homes and hang out, so that he would have, so he could feel a little bit of normalcy, and so there was this deep well of connection and love and appreciation and all of this amazingly powerful positive energy. And then sex was introduced. But for them, even though the story is sort of classic, it's an unbelievably wild study in predatory behavior because of the way it's done. You see it all unfold before you and go, what? Like, how is this even possible? But the thing that has me all strung out about is trying to put into place an understanding of how something that was created in this powerful feeling of love, which for both sides of the equation was very real. It wasn't like one side was, Michael was being all lovey and they were kind of like, this guy's a little weird. Everybody was all in. And it almost seemed to me, and even as I watched these interviews, I was trying to understand, and then I started to freak out because I found myself not understanding what the problem was. These kids received this amazing amount of attention and love that moved into a different form, but they didn't experience it as different. They experienced it as an extension of the experience of love that they were having until they were told differently, until it was explained to them that they were abused and that they were seriously abused and that they were groomed. And so all of the information that comes from the outside world is trying to completely invalidate their entire experience. And their entire experience was love. And now they're completely fucked up. I mean, like, seriously damaged. And I don't know enough about their history to know how that has evolved. But just based on what I saw, and I haven't even seen the last 2 hours of the movie yet. I watched the first 2 hour, the first section, which is its own thing, and then I watched the interview, and I have to go back and watch the end of it. So it really left me with a lot of questions about, okay, I'm confused here. What am I missing in this equation? Because I get it. I get predatory behavior is not cool. I get all that. I'm not trying to in any way make it okay to prey on kids. But it's really hard to see that because of the amount of love that was used and the amount of love that was expressed and felt in the process, that you go, so wait, we can use love to do evil things? That throws a whole conundrum in my world that I don't even know how to begin to deal with. On the flip side, I go, leave him alone. Had somebody not told them that there was something wrong here, they'd probably be fine and continuing to be fine. That's subjective on my part because I don't have anything to back that up. But based on what I saw, the one of the guys is still deeply in love with Michael, deeply, deeply connected to him, and doesn't even know how to process some of the questions that Oprah was asking him. He didn't have answers for, because in his mind he has no idea what she's talking about because he didn't have that experience. They talk about when these guys went to trial and now they're being called liars. It's like the whole Cohen thing. They lied once, so now they're liars forever, and they're making stories up and whatever. But I'm reminded, I was telling you, I had a conversation with a guy in my car over something completely different. And this was about I joke with people because, people live in the Midwest in the winter. I've always kind of joked about, like, how do you do that? How do you stay there every winter? Because every winter it's the same story. It's like we're 18 feet deep in snow. I only get to see this much of my face for 4 months. I don't, it's like, I'm like, so why do they do it? And I was talking to a guy today, and he actually said something really simple, which made it all make sense. He grew up there. It's what he knows. It's what he was entrained in. So to him, what I perceive as a hardship is just normal. It's life, We have spring, we have summer, we have fall, we have winter, and our winters happen to act like this. It's not a bad thing. It is what it is. And that sort of translated into this experience of watching this film and these kids. That was their environment. That's what they knew. That's what they knew, and they worked in, and they lived in, and thrived in. And somewhere along the way, somebody said, well, it was evil. And you go, what? He did some of the classic things about, they had a lot of conversations about, we can't tell people about this. People can't know about this, because if they know about this, our lives will be ruined. If they find out what's happening between you and I, it will be both you and I who suffer. So this is our special time. This is our special whatever, So there was that aspect of the grooming process that obviously was about someone who knew what they were doing wasn't okay. But the kids then took on that mantle. And so when it came time for them to go to court originally, they didn't have an experience of being abused, so they couldn't say they were abused. They had an experience of being loved, maybe in a way that was different than other people, but for them, that was love. And so when they were younger, sitting on the bench, answering the questions, I wasn't there for it. I don't know the actual specific questions, but the reality is they didn't experience abuse, so they couldn't identify it. So asking them if they'd been abused was a ridiculous question, because there was no abuse in their world. They lived in the greatest fantasy they could ever even imagine. They were best friends with Michael Jackson. They stayed in Neverland for weeks on end. They went on tour with him. They got to do things that most human beings will never touch in their lifetime. And so for them, that was a whole other experience. So anyway, I think I've outlined my confusion enough. Now I'm just not real sure where to go with it. And even as I was talking, wasn't getting anywhere with it. So what do you think? What do you think?
Well, to try to put some structure around where you've offered to take us on our adventure today is trying to operationalize or define some of the words that you're using, like love. What is love? Isn't there a song? What is love?
Yep. Baby, don't hurt me no more.
Well, let's use that. Yeah. So then we'd have to define what is hurt, right? So it's like every time you put a new word out there, we have to get rid of the assumptions that we all make about what that means, and actually who gets to be the one to define what is love and what is hurt and what is abuse. So over time, each of those definitions have a philosophical definition, a theological definition, a legal definition. There's one word can have three different definitions depending upon the context you're using it in. And ultimately, how is this a problem? Which is, again, what's the definition of a problem? So to take this discussion that we're having and to try to get somewhere with it, to make some sense of it, we could take each of those words and try to define them. Okay. And some of it seems to be an individual, personal definition, and some of it appears to be more of a cultural definition, and some of it might even be a human history definition of what is okay today. For example, we don't get married until our 20s and 30s today, but that happened at 14 and 15 only 200 years ago. It was no big deal. We would consider that child abuse today, which was normal not that long ago.
Mm-hmm.
If we go back to trying to define what is love, and we use a sacred document to define that, it's usually considered to be something that has patience and kindness, that's not boastful, doesn't seek its own, meaning it's not selfish, it accepts all things, endures all things, and it doesn't change. That's one definition of love that a sacred manuscript uses. But usually love doesn't involve something that's self-serving. So could the expectation or the inclusion of a sexual activity be considered self-serving? And that's hard to define, because who's to say that the boy didn't enjoy it also? I mean, we weren't there. We will never know. But what neurobiologists would say is, well, if we're trying to get to a point where sexual activity should be mutually consented,
Mm-hmm.
at what age or what level of maturation does one have the ability to actually give consent? And some neurobiologists would say not until the age of 25 is the human brain actually fully matured, where all the neurons are present and they've bundled and wired and fired and they're organized. But clearly that our society doesn't use 25. The auto insurance industry uses the age 25, and the car rental industry uses the age 25. They know that if you're 25 or older, chances are you'll bring the car back that you're renting in the same condition it was when it left.
Right.
But if you're under age 25, it's probably going to come back with some dings, or the tires are going to be squealed or something. But our military uses the age 18. Our voters, our society uses age 18 as you can vote, but you can't buy cigarettes, you can't drink alcohol, and you can't have sex. So some of these things seem to be arbitrary. They're not to the person, because some people mature faster than others, but to have a hard and fast line is really difficult. In my industry,
it was one of the things that I'm realizing that was never discussed, taught, and they were pretty graphic in this movie, and when they transitioned into the sexual experiences. They were very sensitive about peeling each layer of it, like how it evolved. But I do not recall, at least in what I've seen, at any time that either of the boys in their experiences ever had a moment of resistance in the process. We were talking about consent.
Sure.
Meaning that in my experience, kids are pretty straightforward in that regard. If they don't like something, they're really clear. And especially if you're doing something that's really not cool, they're really clear. It seems. I mean, I guess there's some that are not, because there's a lot of kids that get abused, but it's something that sticks out to me that was not talked about, or not even, it didn't even come up that they went through any kind of, but I'm a boy and you're a boy, or I'm white and you're black, or why are you touching me? Never came up. It was never stated anywhere. That's just fascinating to me.
Well, that part of it is very interesting, and I think that that's more a cultural, those things that you just, the same sex or the race part of it, those are less concerning than the age part of it.
Yeah.
I mean, they're factors, but they're less concerning. I mean, ultimately, sex is play, and little boys play together, little girls play together, little boys play with little girls. actually, it's quite common for little boys and little girls to play sexual games together somewhere between age 5, 6, and 7.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of our psychosexual development. And then that initial play time seems to go underground, and all of a sudden boys think girls have cooties and girls think boys are gross and disgusting, and then they don't like each other again until 12, 13, 14, when they go through puberty, and all of those programs are lit off and excited and stimulated.
That's where
But I
mine went
think
wrong, Jeff. That's where mine
what's that?
went wrong.
Yeah.
That's where mine went wrong. I started diddling when I was 7, 8, 9 years old, and except it was always boys, and it never well, it did when I got
never went underground.
No, well, it didn't happen with girls until junior high school, driving age. So no, that would have been high school. But anyway, yeah, just interesting process, because I always laugh at anything that says that there's anything less than, that homosexuality is anything less than an organic process than anything else is. Because that for me was normal.
Yeah.
That was normal. Anyway, I'm sorry. That was just a little sideline there.
So
I did look up love.
Yeah.
As a noun. I wanted to see if there was more to it, because it really isn't much. It is an Old English of Germanic origin. Lubiati, libet, it is pleasing or desire, also by leaf. But anyway, so the noun, intense feeling of deep affection, a deep romantic or sexual attachment to someone, affectionate greeting conveyed to someone on one's behalf, or love as a personified figure like Cupid or whatever. A great interest and pleasure in something, a person or thing that one loves. So it's kind of an interesting non-definition. I mean, in the context that we think of love as an energy, as a field, as opposed to a noun, as a thing. I think that's kind of interesting.
One of the books that I very frequently refer to when we talk about love and the expression of it is the book that was called The 5 Love Languages. There are probably more than 5, but the 5 primary ways of expressing love would be encouraging words, acts of service or acts of kindness, gift giving, quality time, and physical touch. And what's interesting is all of us do all of those, but we prioritize them different. Some people will put physical touch at the top of the list. Some people will put gift giving at the top of the list. And what I find really fascinating in my work with couples is generally, if this is the order, you go, encouraging words, physical touch, gift giving, quality time, and acts of service. It's usually just the opposite for the spouse. I find that fascinating. And so where they're really finding compatibility is they'll find one that they flow in the most, and that's the one that the relationship is built upon.
Well, I find it also interesting, Jeff, that what just took place is the definition of love switched from a noun to a verb midstream. So what you're talking about is what you were referencing were acts of love. So the way someone expresses love, not love.
Right.
So that's an interesting distinction to me, because we didn't do anything different in our conversation, and it automatically went from
how I got there, Jim, was that's what the documentary was about, was what Michael did or what these boys experienced.
Right.
They experienced, it is a fascinating word because it is one of the few words that is both a noun and a verb. And we use it wildly different. Just like the word snow for us in Eskimo language, whatever that is They have like 32 different ways of describing snow, and we use one. So that I always find that interesting, that they have wet snow, dry snow,
Yeah.
sticky snow, whatever kind of, whatever all the different
Which is kind of
possibilities
funny
are.
because it's really, I mean, especially now being here in Colorado, snow is very distinct. I mean, and it's all different. Every time it snows, it's a whole
Right,
different experience.
right.
It's
And prior
fascinating.
to moving there, you had like almost zero experience with snow, either you or Michael. I can't
No,
remember
Michael, yeah, I
which.
grew up in it, but still the same, remembering that. But yeah, it's a fascinating thing.
So if we go back to what it feels like to me that we're processing and discussing is, was it love, or what is love? And did these boys and Michael's, what I would call playmates, oh good Lord, I've got a little beep thing going on that never happens, but it's happening today. So that's kind of funny.
It's just highlighting the importance of what you're about to say.
Well, yeah,
No
I guess
pressure.
so.
No pressure.
All right. I got rid of it. It was, so I think we were somewhere in the still, was it love? To me, it was play. And Michael included sex acts as part of the play that the boys engaged with. So first they played with trucks and giraffes and roller coasters, and then they played with penises. Still just play. And it was fun until somebody said, hey, that shouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
And I'm sure the boys thought, now I haven't seen the movies yet, I will, but the boys probably thought, well, how could mom and dad not know this was taking place? This just must be what all boys and older men do. I don't
Well,
know.
no.
I don't know.
Yeah, no. There was specific direction to the parents not understanding. In the dialogue that Michael would have with these kids, there would be, they won't understand,
Okay.
but again, the way it was presented, it wasn't a don't do this or else. I mean, it was
Right.
just
Yeah, it
almost
wasn't a
still coming.
threat.
Yeah, it was still coming from that space that they shared together. Um, so
Back to the play. It was
yeah,
adventurous, fun. And even, sometimes when kids play together, they know that they're involved with mischief, and it's their little secret, which makes the play even more fun. It's the introducing the taboo factor.
yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I can go back through my experience as a kid. I remember all kinds of experiences like that. That the titillation or the stimulation was a large part of it because that fueled the experience. It added dimension to the experience. It heightened the experience. It did all kinds of things because you could, you were taking things to a place that you hadn't gone to before. And that stretches you in ways that you didn't know you'd be stretched before, in your experience and your feeling and your joy and your fear, whatever it was. But yeah, I think you make a good point. I think there was, the love factor, and that's really the piece of it that's kind of got me hung up because he didn't use any negative energy to create what he wanted. And
Right. It was just play. It was play. It was adventure. It was
yeah,
fun. It was exploring. It had taboo to it. Where I think our culture gets hung up on we shouldn't be doing that, because it was all those things. And clearly the way that you described it in the beginning of our podcast was when the boys thought about it in their minds and they went back and they were recalling it, it lit them up, and it was still, there was still affection and admiration and connection and all those positive attributes about it.
and no fear and no anger.
Where I think our culture goes sideways with that, Jim, is if in some cases we allowed that, it would, I think our culture looks at it like a cancer, and it would just start spreading.
Mm.
That those little boys would then be encouraging other little boys or girls, it's not just a boy thing, but other kids to be exploring that with their brothers and sisters, and they don't have the ability to say no, or they don't have the ability to say, I'm not consenting to this. So
Yeah.
that's where we go sideways with it, is how could we say that at age 7 it's okay, but at age 6 it's not? So we pick 18, but 17 it's a problem, 19 it's okay, or 18 it's okay. It's such a difficult issue to get into. But you're spot on. When is the problem what actually occurred, or is the problem the belief that it should not have occurred?
Yeah. And that's where in my mind, I keep running up to that intersection and going, I don't know which way to go here, because I get it. This is, again, my dilemma in it is not in any way that it's justifiable.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, no, it's not and yet. It's a, it's a conundrum, because I guess maybe because I didn't experience it, I don't have a moralistic high horse to sit on with this. So I can't grab my horse and jump on and get all moral about it, because I don't have anything. I don't have any energy on it. I don't have any. I don't have any stuff about it. It's just like looking at it and going, what's wrong with this picture? Well, everything's wrong with this picture. But how can everything be wrong with the picture when the picture is so filled with love and positive energy?
Well,
but
so
not
what
now.
if we said it was,
but not now?
We're kind of cycling back again, where we never really defined what love is. So there would be some who would say love cannot include sexual manipulation. Love cannot include predatory nature. And you used that word earlier.
Yeah.
I turned that into sexual manipulation or sexual expression with beings who are not old enough to maturely consent to participating in that behavior.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really what it comes down to. It can be loving. It can be loving in the terms of, I'm enjoying this, using that as the definition of this. Isn't there that expression, how can this be wrong if it feels so right? And there was a whole nother song done about that too.
Yeah, there was. True.
Yet again, where does it stop? Where is the line?
Well, and it's interesting, that you pointed out that I did use the word about predation, or about being a predator, because the reality was he was absolutely brilliant at it.
Well, we're assuming that it was a premeditated process, and we don't know that. We don't know that maybe just
after the first one, it's premeditated. Yeah.
That for Michael was sexual play part of his way that he loved?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the way it was described, the way it was explored, I would absolutely say yes.
So is that predation, or is that just hey, if you're going to hang out with me, we're going to have sex? Is that predation?
That's a really good question, because my choosing to see it that way is a judgment of the experience, and the conundrum I have is because of my judgment of the experience. Because right. I'm saying, okay, the world sees this as absolute predatory behavior. And I'm watching, and I can see it. I can see that there is a definite movement toward building these relationships, and there was a definite movement to, but it was all to satisfy his loneliness.
I'm supposed to go on a date tonight with my girlfriend.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping to get lucky.
Yeah.
It's kind of what we do when we go out on dates.
Yeah.
Does that make me a predator?
Of a form. because you're planning.
And what if she's thinking the same thing? Does that make her a predator?
Well, maybe.
Or is it just kind of, hey, we're dating each other. We've been in a relationship for a while. We're kind of setting this thing in motion. This is what we expect, and that will happen.
Yeah.
Does that make us predators?
You're going to execute behaviors that you know will stimulate her toward that end, and she's potentially going to do things that are going to stimulate you toward that end if that's where you're both thinking, which is manipulative behavior, which is you're not trying. I mean, I guess it's about the end result. So if there's a predator, there has to be prey, and there has to be the what do they call the thing on the other side of it? The predator and the prey.
Victim?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the predator and the prey. But to your point, I mean, based on, and I'll be very interested when you have a chance to see to have further dialogue in your experience of it, because just because it's the evolution of it is just so fascinating. As you're sitting there watching, and you're watching how it evolved and how naturally it evolved and how easily it evolved. And at the same time, wondering why nobody asked questions. Like there's one scene where the mom's talking, and neither kid has a relationship with their mother that's very healthy right now. She asked them point blank, have you forgiven their mothers? Because their moms were intimately involved. They were there all the time. And this was happening while they were in the other room, which in and of itself kind of, that's another part of it that just sort of irks the crap out of me is now that it is a thing, not only are they confronting losing an entire chunk of their life for no good reason, meaning they had incredible, wonderful, powerful, loving, and awesome experiences, and that all gets invalidated because of this perception, because now all of it was because he wanted sex. And I think that that's a fallacy. I think that he wanted connection, and he only knew how to connect with young people in that fashion, in that, not necessarily sexually. That evolved, I think. But anyway, that's my supposition. But the idea that they it was not a thing until it was a thing. That's where I stumble.
Is part of what makes it abusive, Jim, what you just said, where at some point when I no longer want you sexually, you feel discarded, you feel less than my attention or attraction and my desire to connect with you. If it doesn't include sex, sorry, but I'm just not that interested in you any longer. And so then it gets all reduced down to the only reason I ever really wanted you was because you were in that set of variables that made you sexually attractive to me.
I don't know that it was sexual to begin with. That's the part I'm struggling. Another piece of it that I'm not sure if the motivation was actually the sex, or if the motivation was the connection, getting the connection and having the connection led to needing to expand the connection, which pushed it to other areas. Now, I have to remember he was an adult. So he was sexually, he may not, who knows how sexually active he was as an adult, other than with the kids. So it's kind of like, it's a lot of not know, but for the longest time he didn't start having public relationships until after that whole thing came out, I thought. But I may be misremembering, and it's probably irrelevant, but I'm thinking in terms of his own. Here's this guy who becomes the most popular and most successful, most recognizable voice and face and being on the planet. Like, how do you?
He was a demagogue.
How do you hold that? and where do you hold it, and what do you do with that? And it looks like he did what he could from where he had with what he had, uh, but he obviously was flawed, and to the degree, this is another thing I think I mentioned to you, he was so good at it that he had to have learned it somewhere. You know, it had. I mean, and apparently it's known that he was abused by his dad, but there had to have been other things, because there's no way he could be that skilled without having learned it.
Well, couldn't we also say that about his music? He learned that from somewhere. So where would he have learned it? Prior life, different
Maybe,
lifetime.
maybe, yeah.
I mean, most of the aficionados or the true prodigies or the true, they've done that before. I think we talked about that in a previous podcast. I can't remember the webpage any longer, but there are famous people that all of us know that are synced up to people that look very much like them 100 years ago, 150 years ago, 200 years ago, that they sync up with, that they say, this was me in a prior life.
Okay.
Couple of them that I can think of off the top of my head is one of our recent generals that was in charge of NATO believed that he was George Washington reincarnate. There's a woman on the planet right now that looks like and acts like Marilyn Monroe that says she was Marilyn Monroe in a prior lifetime. The guy that ran the fastest man on the planet that wins all the Olympic sprinting contests, I can't remember his name.
Usain Bolt?
Yes, believes he was reincarnate from Jesse Owens, who was also an Olympic sprinter back in the early 1900s. Okay. So it's fascinating. These people that are into music say that, yeah, this was me now. This was me 100 years ago as a composer. So yeah, it's believed that some people that show up on the planet that have these what appear to be amazing gifts and talents, this isn't their first rodeo.
Yeah, well, that would seem kind of obvious, but at the same time, a good point to bring out, because
so in my line of work, I also do, I'm a trauma therapist, and I've come to find that some of the traumas that people are experiencing in their present day life now followed them here from past lives, particularly like I've talked about this before, where people they're petrified of water, but they have no near drowning experiences or semi-drowning experiences in this lifetime.
Yes.
And I put them into a mild trance. We go back, and sure enough, there it is. They're on a shipwreck. It's really not that hard to do.
Right.
So could Michael have learned this behavior previously, and he just came here prepackaged and ready to open it up and go there? For me, it's easy to see that and connect the dots, because it's what I do, and I see it frequently.
Yeah, no, I mean, it makes sense, and particularly especially for the talent side of it. But I guess it would be true for all aspects, in some form or another. I mean, all of whatever the events that came together that created that yearning or need for him to connect to, younger people. Because it was an evolution. It wasn't like, hurry up and get undressed. It was an evolution. They built a very deep connected relationship, an intimacy in their experience for over time, that evolved there. So I do want to kind of circle back around a little and kind of dig a little deeper or scratch a little more into this. We're kind of, I feel like we're kind of giving some reasons and maybe some possibilities for behavior, and my places that I'm hung up on is more about the energy that was used and the energy that was permeating the experience, and I'm trying to it stimulates a sadness, which is kind of a strange feeling or kind of a strange response to me. As I'm talking about it, and that when it comes down to this idea of love and using it and having it be such an integral part of this experience, because while I agree with you that there was fun, I can't discount what I saw in the way of the love from
admiration,
both,
to deeply admire,
and maybe
adoration.
Maybe you have a good point in that response, is that maybe I'm putting too much attention on the idea of it being love instead of something other than love, which doesn't necessarily mean it's negative. It just means that, like you're saying, it's play, it's admiration, it's
well, it was affection. It was connection.
Yes.
It was acceptance.
Yes.
It was adoration. And all of those are elements of what we call love. Again, it was like the Eskimos have 32 different words for snow.
Yeah.
And they might need to use 5 or 6 of them to describe a particular set of snow right now. So yes, it was all of that. It was more than just play, for sure.
Yeah.
But imagine if God or Jesus or the Archangel Michael appeared to one of us right now and developed a relationship with us. How important would we feel in their presence?
Oh, seriously.
Yeah. And one day, one of them said, I'd really like a blowjob. Probably wouldn't be that hard to make that happen if you felt that important and that special and that amazing in their energy. Probably would not be that hard to go there. And it would be considered abuse on the part of Michael or the Holy Spirit or God or Jesus or anybody else, the Dalai Lama, Buddha, any of them, because they would be abusing their position of power and influence for their own gain.
And I guess, and maybe and in the end, that's what it boils down to, because the difference in the equation that you were presenting, we're both adults in the picture, and the big difference is we're talking about a 7-year-old.
Yeah, who can't process all that,
right?
And would simply say, "Oh, this must be just like playing army trucks right now, or heading the giraffe." Isn't this fun?
And no different though than, but what happened to the adults in the room?
They were the ones that were experienced Michael like God, and God gets special consideration, and God gets to play by his own rules. Doesn't live by the same rules that everybody else does.
Yeah, that's really good. That's really good. It's so interesting to me that
we say no, or we ask Michael what he's really doing, he won't ask us to come here anymore.
Yeah, we won't be special. We won't be the special ones that he relies on for his connection. And yeah, so interesting. And so interesting that it's happened after Michael's dead. So really nothing can come of it except what we're doing, what other people are doing, which is talking about it, trying to understand it. Because I truly don't see how anybody can watch it and not be kind of like, I don't get it. I mean, I get it. I see it. I'm watching it and I'm still going, what? This is so twisted and weird and off the wall. And it's just not, it doesn't appear that black and white.
It isn't, but with regard to the law, we have to try to make it be.
Yeah.
And particularly, like if you took any of those boys that had this until they were told it wasn't a good experience or should not have been, it was to them, did they have any siblings that they took these behaviors and played outside of Neverland with other kids?
And they never got into that. Although, interestingly enough, both of the men in this film both have children now. Interestingly enough. like I said before, Wade, his epiphany was his child, his son, watching his son grow and all of a sudden go, oh my God. The other one, has such, he freaks me out a little, because he still has the same inherent sweetness that he had as a kid. And this is the one that really blew me away watching, because this is the one who kind of went there every time he was talking. He was living it while he was talking about it. He's damaged. I mean, he's seriously damaged. I don't think he has any real grasp on reality. I mean, not in the sense that he's like flaky and weird. He's so undone by the whole experience, and I think he only recently was able to call it, and still struggles with calling it abuse, because he doesn't believe it.
Right.
It's fascinating stuff.
So one of the things I remember from grad school about our psychosexual development is that our early experiences, they get time stamped on our consciousness or on our mind with regard to what the elements were of that original experience. And we use that as the standard or the hallmark to then compare other experiences like that to that one, to gauge whether the next one is better or worse, or how it develops or grows. So how could this young man, maybe not a young man today?
No, he's in his 30s now, I think.
Okay, so how can he recreate that experience? He can't.
Mm-mm. No, there are too many elements that were so far out of his control or even his purview that he would have no way of being able to recreate that experience.
And that's part of the abuse, is that it cannot be recreated. He can never experience that again. He'll never be that special to somebody that's that famous, and also as an adult acted like a child, because that's really what Michael was doing.
Yes.
He was an adult child.
Yes.
And I don't mean that to be disrespectful to anybody that's a Michael fan. That's just an observation.
I mean, none of this conversation is meant at all that way.
Mm-hmm.
I don't. It adds a level of complexity to my engagement with him or his music. I don't know yet, because I haven't encountered it. I haven't actually encountered that experience yet to know how I'd feel about it, if I'd feel anything about it. I mean, it definitely had an impact to see how profoundly efficient he was, and how profoundly good at it he was.
The grooming?
Yeah. It's just mind blowing, because it was so easy and so natural and so normal for him.
Well, so what if you got rid of the for him, but it was just the conditions? You're making it sound like he premeditated it all, rather than it could have been his brother if he was as talented and had all the fame and fortune and the personality. And what if it was just the perfect storm? It really wasn't all the premeditation. It was just, this is just easy because it is.
Could well be. I mean, and like I said, I think there was at least 5 or 6 that at least somehow got addressed through the course of this movie that I saw. These 2 guys were the only 2 who have come forward and are willing to talk about it in that fashion. But so there was a long history. I mean, it went on for a long time, with many different kids of that age group. But they even talked about the discovery, of when one was going by the wayside as the new one came in. And then the
Sure.
mothers talked about it.
Well,
The mothers talked about when they realized that there was a new boy. But they still didn't equate it to the sexual thing. It was just a new playmate. The parents had that experience.
right.
Wild and crazy.
Do you think it was easy for Bill Clinton to womanize or Donald Trump to womanize? Do you think they premeditated it, or was it just easy? Or John F. Kennedy, or any of the super political rock stars, or the preachers, or anybody else? Isn't it just, it's because it's easy?
Yeah. I don't know that the premeditation question and that question are the same question, but I don't know that it's one or the other. I don't know that premeditation precludes being easy, or that being easy, or that being premeditative precludes being easy, or the other way
Well,
around.
you keep saying it was so easy for him, as if he was really good at it. And I'm simply offering another perspective of maybe he really wasn't that good at it. It was just the conditions. It was just so easy because of all of the conditions.
Oh, I got you. So that if he wasn't as famous, or he didn't have as much money, and it wasn't as easy to
Exactly.
throw the cash around,
Exactly.
or throw that it may not have been as. Gotcha. Yeah, that's a very good point too.
Take Donald's money away from him and put him in society like everybody else, and would he be with the woman he's with?
No.
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 Nope.
Yeah. Nope. He'd be a fat on the couch asshole living in New Jersey, watching football games on television and eating Twinkies.
Wow, pretty descriptive, Jim. Not that you have any opinion about
Actually, it
that or
wouldn't be
anything.
Twinkies. It would be, what is it? What is this thing? McDonald's or whatever it is, fast food. That's so funny. So in the end here, I think what we're saying in this is that there really isn't a conundrum with regard to, because I think where I got locked in was this idea of how does someone use that kind of love and create that kind of outcome. And I think what we got to with this is that the thing we're calling love may be a lot of things, but is not likely love. There may have, over the course of time, developed in the connection a deep love for each other, for the individuals, between the individuals, but it isn't love that motivated it. It was actually loneliness that motivated it.
Yes, absolutely. Good job. Excellent.
Yeah. Yeah. So
that actually could never have happened in a pure loving environment.
Yeah. That's what I needed to find. Because it was really twisting my head up trying to figure that out. And then even further wondering why I was stuck there. Because I'm like, really? You're calling it love. It looks like love. It looks like, I mean, what I saw in that guy's eyes definitely was not infatuation.
He probably
that came
experienced
later.
more connection and acceptance. Yeah. His experience of being acceptable, and Michael's ability with all his charisma that he had, was probably way over the top and in a supernatural realm of the ability to communicate connection and acceptance and adoration. That's pretty powerful stuff.
That is.
But yet it was still self-serving.
Yes. And that's ultimately, I think that's why why I was so fascinated with his skill set. Because it was 100% self-serving. It was about satisfying his need, whatever that was, for connection, for attention, but not attention. I mean, like you say, yeah, we're crying out loud. He was the most popular person on the planet, but that doesn't make for connection. that just makes for adoration. That makes for I see you from here. But that's a whole different experience than being connected to people, and then being able to be in that connection, but then misusing that connection to satisfy personal gain, personal ends. Maybe.
I'm going to shift for a moment,
Okay.
but still be talking about the same thing. I've always thought it fascinating that there's a certain manuscript that refers to a certain historical figure uh, as being a virgin and living his whole life on the planet as a virgin up until the time he was crucified.
Mm.
And even though there are other sacred documents that say that he was not a virgin and was married and had children and et cetera, I find it fascinating that we need to desexualize him to make him somebody that we could really admire and respect and consider as holy and above reproach and above physical need and all of that, and put him back in the category of a god that I can't relate to, because that's not me. And I do have those desires and those needs and those inklings and drives and urges and blah, blah, blah. And I was created with them, which is the bizarre part, is I didn't even ask for them. I just showed up this way. And this is my programming. And I get to be responsible for how I go about exercising that and exploring that. And when it comes to kids, we put that off limits because they're not able to differentiate between, why is this okay with grandpa or Uncle Bob or daddy or the guy next door who's really nice to me and gives me a lollipop, but it's not okay to do that with my little sister or my little brother or the kid I love having come over and play with me after school.
Yeah.
That's why we don't let it go there. Kids can't differentiate that way.
And that's a very key piece of it is when you see those two adult men who are still 8-year-old kids, still living that experience and not knowing what to do with the fact that it's just been ripped away from them, because they have nowhere to hold any of it. It's frightening. I don't even have words in that way, because it's you think part of it might be like watching a car wreck, but it's not the same. It has a whole different emotional component to it, because there's so much of it that you go, okay, so what's wrong? Okay, and then you go, okay, and the tone changes a little. And it just goes deeper and deeper, and you just the fact that it carried on for as long as it apparently did, and the numbers of boys that were brought into that circumstance, that yeah, it's extraordinary. It's
this idea that I want to share has come to me several times during my podcast, so I want to share it just to recognize the intuitive piece that there's a thing called the Stockholm syndrome, where a captive falls in love with its
captor.
Thank you. I was thinking of kidnapper, but yeah, same thing. And then Patty Hearst is probably a great example of how she was kidnapped and held by the Black Panthers, and came to love and serve in service to their organization and beliefs, even though those were not hers in the very beginning.
Was her thing Black Panthers or Sandinistas?
I thought it was
You could be right. The Sandinistas could be another thing of that time frame, but anyway, sorry. Yes, make your point. My bad.
It's all right. it is a fascinating phenomena that when someone bestows love and affect, what appears to be love, but comes packaged as affection and connection and acceptance and admiration, that we could flip-flop our entire belief system to the point where I've worked with people who have been involved in satanic rituals and who have been involved with taking the lives of their own pets, as well as their baby siblings.
Mm.
And were adored for their behaviors, were admired, accepted, applauded, and yet they're all twisted up inside because they inherently knew that what they were doing had to be done in secret. And as soon as you put that it has to be done in secret part, like, hey, they won't understand if you tell them what we do. You can't tell your parents because they won't understand. As soon as that's introduced, you absolutely know it's abuse. As soon as we can't tell everybody what we're doing, it absolutely falls into the category of taboo, and we shouldn't be doing this. And that's the hallmark that we operate from.
Yeah.
But it's fascinating to me what twists people up so much is back to the, how could it be wrong if it feels so right?
Yeah. I think it's, as you were talking, the thing that over and over in my head is this thing about this desire for connection, and that we see it everywhere. It's a lot of recent studies in the areas of addiction, and stuff is all about connection. That what's lacking for people is true connection, and so we all have our ways of dealing with feeling unconnected or disconnected. And I think it would be great, as we continue, I think we're probably close to wrapping for this particular episode, but I think it would be great to carry on this idea of looking more deeply at connection and looking at the truth around what connection is, how it works, why it works, what it is. Maybe we can really dive into that in our next episode and carry this forward, because I think in the end that seems to be the little bouncy ball that keeps running around this whole thing is people doing what they do because they want to feel connected, because they want to feel connected to something. They want to feel things in a connected fashion. So we can suspend all kinds of stuff. Now, not unfortunately, the reality is with a 7 or 8 year old kid, that's going to be an interesting exploration, because that's connection of a very different fashion than as adults.
Sure.
So there's a lot of fun to have there, but I really appreciate this conversation, and I'm glad we went here and kind of dissected this. It's been it's been an interesting conversation, and I think it's there's much more to come from it. I hope that our hope, obviously, is our listeners, we're going on the adventure. Hopefully you're on the adventure with us. We welcome, encourage, and love any feedback or comments or ideas or thoughts, or, if there's stuff you want us to dig into, we'd love to hear from you. We're excited about where the podcast is going and what is coming of this union between Dr. Jeff and I, and we're in the process of taking the next step for our place, for our podcast, for our businesses, and creating a website and kind of getting more formal and more official. So be looking for that coming out here soon. We're going to be reaching out and sharing that all over the place as soon as we're ready. But lots to do, but this has been a great conversation, and again, great talking to you. Anything you want to say in closing here today, Jeff, as far as where
definitely want to ditto everything you just said. And for folks that are listening that have personal experience with abuse. I hope that we honored the topic in a way that you could feel that we were trying to pull it apart and take a look at, from the inside out,
Yeah.
and that it's not something to feel trivial about in any way, that it is a deep dive into something that could be potentially extremely painful and difficult to look at. And if this is triggered in any way for anybody, reach out to a therapist, reach out to somebody that you need to talk and process this with. Check out the film that Jim referenced, and maybe that'll be part of the processing too. But what I'd like to leave everybody with is this idea that we are acceptable,
Yeah.
and that we are lovable, that we have value and we have worth, that's not based upon our appearance. It's not based upon our social status. It's not based upon our skin color. It's based upon one thing, and that's that we're here on the planet. That's it. We're here on the planet and we're part of the family.
Yep.
And I hope that everybody's enjoying some of the stuff that we're kicking around and talking about, because we're all just one family trying to figure out our way through this thing that we call life. That's it.
That was awesome. Appreciate that. Thanks again, everybody. You can catch us right now on YouTube. We have our YouTube channel, which is Adventures in Truth Podcast, and we have our Facebook page of the same name, Adventures in Truth Podcast. So come by and visit, and soon we'll have a website that you can come visit, which will even be more exciting.
Hooray.
Yeah. So thanks for joining us, and have an amazing day. Bye, everybody.
All right. So long, everyone. Bye-bye.